Hold your position. No one moves. Malik's voice sliced through the comms like a blade, tight with urgency and disbelief. The K9 training compound, normally a place of structured commands and precise movements, had come to a silent standstill. In the center of the wide, sunlit clearing stood a girl, barefoot, no more than 7 years old, frozen in place, her arms stiff at her sides. She wore a dirt-streaked pink hoodie, 2 sizes too big, and her face, smeared with dust, showed no fear, only confusion. Surrounding her in a perfect formation were 6 German shepherds. Not just any dogs. These were elite K9s trained for tactical operations. Each had served in active zones, disarmed threats, and saved lives. These dogs didn't respond to affection or instinct. They responded to programming, training, command, hierarchy, and yet no one had told them to move. No handler had directed this formation. They had done it on their own. Malik stared from the tower, disbelief crawling up the back of his neck. "Are they holding her hostage?" he asked aloud, though no one dared to answer. He zoomed in on the girl's face through the lens. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. Her eyes moved slowly from dog to dog as if studying them, not with panic, but with something eerily calm. On the ground below, Officer Clara Mendoza crouched behind a low barrier, headset pressed to her ear. "Sir, they're not in attack posture. No growling, no exposed teeth, just locked in." "Then what the hell is this?" Malik muttered. "A test? A breakdown?" Clara's voice lowered. "Or something we don't understand." The girl didn't flinch, even when one of the shepherds shifted slightly to close the formation. She watched, unmoving. The lead dog, Delta, took a step forward, slow and deliberate, stopping just inches from her. He lowered his head, sniffed once, and then did the unthinkable. He lay down at her feet, not in submission, not in fatigue, in loyalty. The rest followed. One by one, each dog folded to the ground around the girl, surrounding her not like a threat, but like a guard unit. It was a formation no one had taught them, a configuration no one had ever seen. Malik's heart thudded against his ribs. Someone get me a name, get facial recognition, get security logs, get something. She didn't just wander into this compound. Clara was already running the search. No ID match, no breach in perimeter. She's not in any visitor record. It's like she just appeared. Then came the detail that turned confusion into chills. Johnson, one of the senior handlers, stepped closer to the feed screen and said quietly, "That dog, Delta. He was assigned to Sergeant Eli Maddox." Malik's brows pulled together. "Maddox? The one who died last month?" Johnson nodded. "Killed in the field. And that little girl." He trailed off, but they all understood what he meant. They reviewed the photo. Sergeant Maddox with his dogs, Delta at his side, and on his shoulders was a girl. Same dark curls, same sharp eyes. His daughter. Malik's throat went dry. How would the dogs know? "They don't forget scent," Clara whispered. "Not family, not blood." The girl moved then, slowly lowering herself to the ground. She crossed her legs and sat in the dirt with perfect stillness, placing her small hands in her lap, palms up. Delta responded by inching closer, resting his head gently in her lap. The image alone would have stopped hearts. Malik took a step back from the screen, mind-reeling. "She didn't come here by accident," he said. "She came to find someone." Clara looked up, her face pale with realization. "She came to find the only family she has left. And in the center of that field, surrounded by 6 of the most dangerous, disciplined dogs on Earth, sat a child. No one could explain, and a bond no one could break, not even death." The stillness in the clearing was so complete, it felt sacred. No bark, no breath out of place. Delta stayed nestled against the girl's lap, his thick fur rising and falling with every controlled inhale. The rest of the pack had positioned themselves in a loose but unmistakably protective arc, creating a barrier between the child and the rest of the world. From the tower above, Malik watched in disbelief, unable to reconcile what he was seeing with everything he thought he knew about canine behavior. Trained dogs didn't act like this, not without a command, not in complete synchrony, and certainly not with a stranger. But this wasn't just any girl. Clara's voice came through the headset again, tighter now, layered with emotion she was trying hard to suppress. "We found the image, sir. That's Ivy Maddox, daughter of Sergeant Eli Maddox, age 7, last seen in Nevada 2 weeks ago. Her guardian reported her missing 4 days after that. No sign since, until now." Malik stepped away from the screen and ran a hand over his face. Eli had been one of the best, not just in field ops, but in the way he connected with the dogs. They didn't just obey him, they trusted him, loved him, the kind of handler who didn't need to raise his voice to command loyalty. When the news of his death came in, the entire unit mourned. But no one expected his daughter to show up here, in the middle of a secure K9 training compound, walking straight into the arms of his dogs like they'd been waiting for her. He grabbed the nearest tablet and pulled up Eli's personnel file. Tucked inside a scan of handwritten notes was a small footnote. Started sent imprinting his daughter Ivy onto Delta and Bravo during off-hours training. Unusual, but cleared under supervised bonding. Malik stared at it for a long moment. He made sure they'd never forget her. Outside, Clara was slowly approaching the girl, keeping her movements measured and unthreatening. "Hey, sweetheart," she called out gently, crouching about 20 feet away. "My name's Clara. You're safe here, I promise. Can I sit with you for a second?" The girl didn't respond. Her hand rested on Delta's head. Her eyes focused somewhere distant, but after a long pause, she gave a single nod. Clara inched forward and sat cross-legged on the ground, staying outside the boundary the dogs had formed. "That's Delta, isn't it?" she continued, voice calm and warm. "He was your daddy's dog, right?" The girl blinked slowly, her lips parted. "He remembers me," she said, barely above a whisper. Clara's heart cracked a little. "I think he does. He used to let me sleep on him," Ivy said, "when Daddy came home late and I had bad dreams. Delta never moved until I stopped crying." Now Malik stepped out of the building and into the sun, every step deliberate as he made his way across the compound. He knew this moment would define everything that came next. One wrong move, and the dogs could misinterpret. But he had to see her up close, had to understand. As he approached, Delta lifted his head and looked at Malik, not with aggression, but with silent permission. Malik crouched beside Clara and studied the girl. She was thin, but not starving, dusty, but not injured. Her shoes were worn down, and her cheeks were wind-chapped, but she looked strong, steady. "How did you get here?" Malik asked gently. Ivy looked down at her lap. "I followed the picture." "What picture?" Without a word, she reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a folded photograph. Malik took it carefully. It was a printed snapshot, creased at the corners, edges worn. Eli Maddox, in full uniform, crouched in front of the 6 dogs. Ivy sat on his back, her arms draped around his neck, smiling so wide it lit up the entire frame. Clara leaned in. "Where did you get this?" "Daddy left it in my memory box," Ivy said. "He told me if anything ever happened to him and I felt alone, I should find the dogs. He said they would protect me if I remembered how to ask." "How did you know where to go?" Malik asked. Ivy looked up at him, her voice low and matter-of-fact. "Because I remembered the smell of the base, and because Delta led me here in my dreams." Malik felt the weight of that answer settle into his bones. It wasn't logical, but somehow it made perfect sense. Eli had built more than a bond with his team. He'd built a bridge between his daughter and his dogs, one strong enough to outlive him. "We need to check her for injuries and dehydration," Clara whispered. Malik nodded and looked back at Ivy. "Would it be okay if we brought you inside, just for a little while? Somewhere soft and warm, and with food?" Ivy looked around at the dogs. "Only if they come too." Delta's ears perked. The other dogs rose in unison. Malik smiled softly. They wouldn't have it any other way. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the training field, the group moved as one. Handlers, officers, 6 elite K9s, and a child whose presence defied everything they thought they knew about memory, loyalty, and the invisible threads that bind the living to the lost. And deep in the back of Malik's mind, something stirred, a feeling that this wasn't the end of the mystery, but the beginning of something far more powerful, something Eli Maddox had set in motion long before his death, something only his daughter and his dogs could finish. The base had never seen anything like it. Ivy's arrival didn't just pause daily drills or force tactical meetings to be rescheduled. It redefined the soul of the place. A child, lost and grieving, had walked into the most controlled environment in the country, and 6 elite K9s had broken protocol to surround her without a single command, not as protectors on duty, but as family reunited. Inside the medical cabin, Ivy sat on the edge of a cot, her legs swinging slightly as Clara checked her vitals. The girl didn't flinch at the touch of the stethoscope or the thermometer tucked under her tongue. She was calm, almost too calm, like someone who had already survived the worst kind of storm. Delta sat beside her, his body pressed firmly against the cot, ears twitching at every creak in the floor, every whisper from across the hall. The other dogs waited just outside, pacing in a quiet rotation, as if taking shifts in a guard post they'd invented for themselves. Malik leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes locked on Ivy. He wasn't just watching a child. He was studying a living mystery, one unfolding layer by quiet layer. Rachel had just finished a psychological assessment. Basic questions, nothing invasive, and every answer Ivy gave chipped away at the limits of logic. She hadn't just remembered how to get here. She'd known things no one had told her. Room numbers, names, even Delta's special hand signal for search perimeter, a command that hadn't been used since her father's last deployment. "Did your dad teach you that?" Rachel had asked, her voice gentle. Ivy nodded. "He said it was our secret. He told me, one day they won't understand your voice, but they'll remember mine through you." Now Malik sat beside her, the weight of Eli Maddox's legacy, hanging heavy between them. "Why come here?" he asked finally. "You could have gone anywhere." Ivy looked up at him. "Because this is where his voice still lives." She pulled something from her hoodie pocket, a silver dog tag on a long chain. She held it out to him. Malik took it carefully, his fingers brushing over the engraved letters. SGT. Eli Maddox, K9 Division, loyal to the last. It wasn't just a tag. It was a key, a symbol, the last thread connecting a girl to the man whose bond with these dogs had become the stuff of legend. Suddenly, Bravo barked outside. Once, sharp and alert, Malik stood immediately. "Something's up." He stepped out, eyes narrowing as Echo trotted up the path with something clutched in his jaws. It was a piece of fabric, frayed, camo-colored, stained with something that looked too red to be just rust. Malik took it, eyebrows pulling together. It wasn't from base uniform. It was field gear, older, torn. Behind him, Ivy stood silently at the threshold, Delta now glued to her side. When she saw the scrap in Malik's hand, her face changed. Not fear, not panic, recognition. "That was from his vest," she said. Rachel stepped forward, voice tight. "You're sure?" "I stitched that corner," Ivy replied, pointing to a tiny loop of purple thread tucked in the hem. "He let me fix it before he left." The dogs surged ahead as if that small confession had unlocked something. They moved with purpose, no longer pacing, no longer waiting. Bravo and Echo took the lead, heading toward the old supply shed at the northern edge of the compound, abandoned since a flood damaged the roof last season. Malik and Clara followed, Ivy between them. The dogs stopped outside the shed, barking, with low urgency. Malik pushed the rusted door open and stepped inside. Dust clouded the air, but in the far corner beneath a broken storage crate was a metal case, one of the older field storage units from discontinued K9 deployments. He pried. It opened slowly. Inside were files, paper records, a flash drive, and a sealed envelope marked "In the event of my death." Malik stared down, throat tight. He left a message. They brought it back to the main cabin. Ivy was the one who opened the envelope. Her hands didn't shake. She unfolded the letter with the carefulness of someone unwrapping something sacred. Malik read it aloud. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. But if Ivy found her way here, then she wasn't alone. The dogs know. They always knew. There's something buried in their training, something I couldn't say out loud. I've encoded it. Ivy knows the rhythm. Trust her. The rest is in the files." Rachel looked up slowly. "What rhythm?" Ivy didn't speak. She stood, walked over to Delta, and tapped her fingers lightly against his flank. 2 quick taps, 1 pause, 3 taps. The dog straightened immediately, then sat, then lowered to the ground. The rest of the pack fell into matching positions like dominoes. Then she changed the rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, tap, and Bravo stood, turning to face the wall. It was more than obedience. It was choreography, a sequence built on buried memory. Eli hadn't just trained the dogs. He had trained Ivy to unlock them. The files confirmed it. Hidden inside the old case were encrypted mission logs and GPS coordinates tied to a final operation that had been scrubbed from official records. Data Eli had protected by embedding retrieval sequences into the only safe vessels left, his dogs and his daughter. Clara exhaled hard. He used everything he had, instinct, blood, trust, to leave us a living code. Malik turned toward Ivy, who now sat cross-legged on the floor. Delta curled around her again. You've done more than anyone could have asked, Ivy, he said softly. But we still need you. We need your help to finish what your father started. Ivy looked up, her eyes steady and quiet. Then we start tomorrow, she said, because the past wasn't buried anymore. It had teeth and a heartbeat and 6 loyal protectors ready to follow the one person who could still speak their language. The next morning arrived not with ceremony, but with silence. The compound seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind, usually restless at dawn, stayed low, rustling only the dry leaves along the fence line. Malik stood by the training field reviewing the extracted data from Eli Maddox's flash drive. Every decrypted log confirmed what they had begun to suspect. There had been a covert mission 2 months before Eli's death, a classified recovery op near a no-entry zone that was later buried under red tape. The official narrative claimed the intel had been corrupted and the dogs recalled due to fatigue, but that wasn't the truth. There had been something worth protecting, something Eli died guarding, and now his daughter held the only key to finish what he started. Inside the operations room, Ivy sat at the long metal table with Delta curled beside her. She wore a clean jumper, her curls brushed neatly to the side, but her eyes looked older than they should have, too still for a child who'd just lost everything, yet too focused for someone who didn't know exactly what she was doing. Rachel laid out 6 laminated images of terrain from the border region where the last transmission had been logged. Ivy glanced at each one, then pointed without hesitation to the 4th. There, she said. He said it's under the Shade Rock. Malik raised a brow. Shade Rock? She nodded. He used to tell me stories about it before bed. Said it was a giant black stone that cast a shadow even when there was no sun. He said it's where secrets sleep. Rachel smiled faintly. That wasn't just a story. Using the GPS data from the case and Ivy's reference point, the team triangulated a zone roughly 6 miles outside the original operation boundary. It was an area Eli had marked as red on the map. Off limits, unstable, never searched. Ivy's signal rhythm had already proven accurate in guiding the dogs through sequences even handlers didn't understand. If she could do it again in the mine field, there was a chance they'd uncover what had been buried, both literally and figuratively. They didn't hesitate. The team loaded up before noon. Ivy rode in the lead vehicle between Malik and Clara, her fingers brushing over Delta's fur. In the second vehicle, the rest of the pack sat alert, their bodies balanced perfectly as the wheels jostled over rough earth. Each bump in the road felt heavier than the last, not because of danger, but because every mile forward carried them deeper into the last chapter of a man who had defied orders to leave behind a living legacy. 2 hours later, the convoy stopped at the edge of an overgrown field. Just beyond the tall grass, the silhouette of a massive basalt stone towered out of the landscape, unnatural in shape and oddly cold to the touch. Shade Rock. Ivy stepped out of the truck. Delta immediately pressed to her side. The wind picked up again, swirling red dust in the air, but she didn't flinch. Malik gave a slight nod. When you're ready. She took a breath, knelt, and tapped Delta's side. 3 quick pulses, 1 pause, 2 more. The dog rose, ears forward. She repeated the rhythm, then turned and tapped the same pattern on Bravo's back. One by one, each dog received it, and each responded with immediate movement. No confusion, no hesitation. They began to fan out in an arrow-shaped formation, with Ivy at the tip. Rachel whispered, "They're sweeping like a live patrol." They weren't searching randomly. They were following an embedded protocol, something Eli had drilled into them not just as a unit, but as guardians of something specific. The 6 dogs moved in perfect sync, covering ground with purpose, sniffing, circling, stopping, then moving. Again, until Bravo let out a low, clipped bark. Not warning, discovery. He stood still beside a patch of gravel near the base of the Shade Rock. Ivy approached, her eyes narrowing. He said to look where it sounded hollow, she murmured. Clara handed her a shovel. The girl didn't hesitate, just stepped forward and began to dig, scooping one small mound at a time. Delta joined her, pushing dirt aside with his front paws. It didn't take long. Beneath the thin layer of earth was a buried canister, sealed, metal, and scorched. Malik crouched and gently lifted it out. Inside were encrypted documents, field reports, and a photo of a man no one recognized, but Ivy did. "That's the man Daddy told me not to trust," she said, her voice barely audible. His name wasn't in any record, but the files exposed him as a rogue operator, someone who had betrayed the unit during the mission, and sold intel to mercenaries in exchange for immunity. Eli had discovered the truth, but before he could report it, he'd been ambushed. The betrayal never made it to official records. The evidence, along with Eli's life, had been buried to protect national security. Until now. Malik stood slowly, his expression a mix of awe and fury. He gave his life trying to stop this, and made sure only the people he trusted most could finish the job. "Me and the dogs," Ivy said, standing up, wiping her hands on her jeans. Rachel's voice broke slightly. "You just uncovered a lie that's been sealed for 2 months." And just like that, the air shifted again. Not just relief, reverence. The team returned to the compound that evening under a sky streaked with gold and fire. Ivy didn't speak much on the way back. She didn't need to. The truth had been found. Her father's name would be cleared. The man who betrayed them would be exposed. And the 6 dogs who once sat beside Eli Maddox now followed the only person who could ever truly replace him. That night, Malik stood beside the training wall and placed Eli's dog tag back under the light. He stared at the empty space below. It, reserved for legends who never returned, and pulled out a second tag, a smaller one. It had Ivy's name on it. He pressed it beside her father's and whispered to no one in particular. She didn't just come here to find answers. She came to lead. And tomorrow, that's exactly what she would do. 3 weeks passed. Not much changed outwardly at the K9 compound. The drills resumed, alarms rang at their scheduled times, and the scent of boot polish and dog food still filled the air every morning. But for those who had been there when Ivy Maddox walked through the gates, nothing felt the same. In the East Wing, where handler memorials were etched into stone, 2 new plaques had been added. One was Sergeant Eli Maddox's, updated with the full honors, and a correction to the official record. Died in the line of duty protecting classified intelligence. Cleared of all misconduct. The other, smaller but no less significant, simply read, Ivy Maddox, Guardian, Witness, Code-bearer. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't even old enough to write her own last name in cursive. But the presence she carried, the bond she had rekindled with the dogs, and the truth she had helped unearth had earned her a place no one questioned. Ivy wasn't just her father's daughter. She was his final command, carried forward by instinct, memory, and love. Malik watched from the bleachers that morning as Ivy stood in the training yard once again, not as a visitor, not as a mystery, but as something like an apprentice. Clara had taken her under her wing, teaching her the intricacies of command tone and body language. The handlers who had once raised eyebrows now leaned in when Ivy spoke. When she called Delta, he came before the second syllable. When she signaled Bravo, he moved before she even finished the gesture. The other dogs followed her too, not out of obedience but out of trust. What no one had been able to train in years, Ivy unlocked in weeks. She doesn't command them, Clara said one afternoon watching from the observation deck. She connects with them, like her father did. Only stronger, Malik nodded. It's in her blood. There had been debate, of course, legal guardianship, safety protocols, but in the end, when offered the choice to move in with distant relatives or remain temporarily housed at the compound under constant supervision and care, Ivy had made her answer quietly and without hesitation. I want to stay where he still exists. No one could argue with that, not after what they'd witnessed. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped into a golden haze, Malik brought her into the archives room. He had something to give her. From a locked drawer, he pulled out a worn leather case and set it on the table. Ivy looked up, puzzled. This was your father's journal, Malik said. He didn't write much, but what he did write, he wrote for you. Ivy opened the book carefully. Inside were sketches of the dogs, field notes, pieces of dried grass, glued into corners from places they'd been. On one page was a single sentence in faded blue ink. If I'm gone, let her finish what I started. Not because she must, but because she'll understand. Her hands trembled just a little as she closed the book. She did understand. Over the following weeks, something else began to change. Outside of the compound, news had traveled of the discovery Ivy had helped bring to light. Eli's name, once lost in the fog of a closed mission, was restored publicly. But the media interest didn't last long. What did endure was the internal shift inside the K9 division. Training modules were redesigned, not just to teach commands but to allow for bonds. Programs were created for children of fallen handlers, encouraging visits, connections, even therapy pairing with retired dogs. And every morning, at the end of their first exercise lap, the 6 dogs would stop at Ivy's bunk. just for a second. Just to check in. No one told them to. No one needed to. Then came the day of the formal ceremony. It wasn't flashy. No medals or speeches. Just a circle in the yard. Ivy stood in the center with Delta sitting by her side. Clara read a short dedication, and Malik stepped forward holding something small wrapped in cloth. He knelt and unwrapped it carefully. A modified K9 handler badge. Silver. Engraved not with rank or serial, but with her name and one word beneath. It, interpreter, because that's what she had become. Not a commander. Not yet. But someone who spoke the language no adult could learn, who understood not only the instincts of the dogs, but the emotions behind their discipline. He pinned it gently to the front of her jacket. Your father trusted you with something bigger than a legacy, Malik said. He trusted you to remind us what loyalty actually looks like. The dogs barked, not in confusion, but in chorus. Ivy looked around the circle, at Clara's proud smile, at Rachel's tear-filled eyes, at Malik's steady presence, and then down at Delta, whose eyes never left hers. She reached into her pocket and held out the old photograph of her with her father, the dogs at their feet. Then she tore off a corner and placed it beneath a loose stone by the flagpole, tucking it gently into the earth. Now it's part of this place, she said. Years would pass. The compound would change again. Dogs would retire. New ones would be trained. But there would always be a story passed quietly from handler to handler about a little girl who walked into the center of a formation meant to protect against enemies, and instead became the heart they protected. And if you visited the grounds at sunrise, you might still see 6 dogs gathered outside a small bunkhouse door, waiting, watching, guarding, because some bonds don't break, they just take new form. And sometimes, the smallest voice is the one that reminds everyone why they serve in the first place.